In this video, we uncover a true crime story so shocking and twisted that no Hollywood movie could ever top it. Truth be told, the web is one of the most dangerous places. Scammers, hackers, and bugs can all steal private data through pop-up ads and hackers. These are all small things. People are the real danger. The people behind all scams are real, but they act like someone else. Most scary is that every day, innocent and easy-to-target internet users fall for their tricks, hoping to get rich quick, meet a good-looking person, or just for fun. All con artists are skilled at taking advantage of people's feelings. It's possible to be smart and still fall for a scam. We all want to think that we're too smart to be fooled and will never fall for a con artist's tricks. But the truth is that anyone can be lied to. Find the right way to get to their heart and then use their flaws against them. The person who was hurt in this case couldn't even imagine that someone hundreds of miles away who she had never met had already chosen she had to die. If you had $9 million, what would you do? Would you take that amount from an unknown person? Would it even occur to you that someone could simply give away so much? Think for a moment and tell me the value of a human life. For $9 million, would you be willing to take a life? Cynthia Hoffman primarily noticed the positive aspects of individuals. She would return a smile if someone smiled at her. She was quick to offer assistance to anyone in need. She was always friendly, trustworthy, and eager to be a part of something greater. So if someone talked to her about friendship, she thought of that person as a friend. Cynthia Hoffman was born in Anchorage, Alaska on October 8, 1999. Her loved ones called her Cece. Cynthia was the middle child of Barbara and Timothy Hoffman's big, boisterous, and devoted family. She had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, but she adored her father above all else. Clearly, Cynthia was a daddy's daughter. Cynthia assisted her father with his work on the weekends, while other children hung out at malls or were glued to their phones. Timothy's daughter was his right-hand assistant, and he was a multi-talented man. She gave him tools if he was repairing a fence. She was usually close by, willing to help, support, or get something if he was fixing a motorbike. Being brought up with virtues like empathy and compassion, Cynthia was a devoted friend who was always available to help others in need. Compared to his previous children, Tim showed Cynthia more affection, and that was for a cause. Due to a mild developmental delay, the girl had an innocent, childlike perspective on the world. Tim didn't want anyone to exploit Cynthia's weakness because he was aware that not everyone was well-meaning. He made an effort to protect his daughter from untruthful friends and challenging circumstances when she was a child. The Hoffman family settled in Anchorage, Alaska, where the untamed grandeur of nature coexisted with urban life. The city is well known for its tight-knit community, varied dining options, and quaint coffee shops. But there's another planet just beyond the busy city streets. The horizon is covered with mountains, thick woods, and a great deal of wilderness. The disparity of the seasons was peacefully accepted by Cynthia's family, who cherished Anchorage. The Hoffmans loved being outside and hiking on rocky paths. They also treasured the peaceful routine moments that comprised their life. Cynthia spent a lot of time studying and exploring her future as a teenager, but she also loved being outside. She went through a specific program after high school to acquire useful skills that would aid her in her father's business. Cynthia, on the other hand, was immensely proud of herself after finding a job at a nearby restaurant quite fast because she craved independence. She loved making a life on her own and getting to know new people. The girl made an effort to be self-sufficient, but her father continued to be her primary provider. He made sure his daughter felt appreciated, valued, and safe in every way. His protective instincts were heightened by Cynthia's developmental delay. Timothy supported his daughter's ambition to reach her full potential while simultaneously trying to protect her from the harsh realities of the outside world. Cynthia, in turn, looked to her father as a personal friend and mentor. She messaged him frequently just to let him know what was going on in her life and to express her thoughts and feelings. Tim would always listen. She knew Cynthia's greatest desire was for her father to be pleased with her. In everything she did, her will to succeed was evident. Cynthia loved her relationship with her father, but she truly desired something more. She desired to engage more with her contemporaries and make friends outside of her family. She yearned for acceptance, friendship, and a feeling of community. Just like other teenagers, her childhood wish of having a best friend was eventually fulfilled one day. High school was where it all began. At a shopping center, two adolescent girls happened to meet. Their common interests, sense of humor, and attitude on life led to their rapid bonding. Hoffman and Denali Bramer went to the same high school. Cynthia felt happy and confident that she could now confide in someone other than her father because of her friendship with a peer. Denali, who was born Denali Dakota Sky Bramer, had a rough upbringing. Tragedy was the beginning of her aware life. Her original mother Nicole House gave birth to twins Karan and Gabrielle when she was just 2 years old. The babies cried all the time, and one of the twins died as a result of an act that their mother's new partner did in a fit of wrath. He seized the girls, slammed them together, and flung them onto a bed. Corey and somehow survived while Gabrielle collapsed awkwardly on the ground. It was all in front of Denali. Bramer's later life was influenced by this unfortunate incident. Nicole, her mother, lost custody as a result, and the girl was taken in by another family. Denali, who was raised by her adoptive parents, understood what it was like to feel different and alienated. The two teenagers may have genuinely understood one another because of this. They presented themselves as two inseparable girls who did everything together on social media. Together they danced, laughed, and commemorated significant occasions. Best friends forever is written in the captions of their pictures. Yet what people share online is rarely accurate. The girls disagreed, as do most friends. Common adolescent arguments, primarily involving boys. Denali and Cynthia frequently competed with one another since they each desired love and attention from the other. The girls often fell in love with the same men. It was the usual drama of high school. They quickly resolved their differences and resumed their shared laughter and enjoyment. Online, Denali frequently used pseudonyms. She liked to pretend to be different people. She seemed to be able to escape her past thanks to this. She was given the name Denali Dakota Sky Bramer following her adoption. When she was a teenager, Cynthia's father, Tim, preferred to call her Angel. Bramer spent a lot of time with Cynthia and was a regular visitor to the Hoffman residence. Together, they worked on school projects or watched films. Given that his daughter regarded Denali as her best friend, Tim recognized the significance of their bond. However, Cynthia wasn't always treated like a friend by Denali. She actually frequently stopped her, made fun of her speech patterns, and once made fun of her outright. Cynthia didn't appear to notice, or maybe she didn't want to. Furthermore, she swiftly changed the subject and smoothed over the painful times by saying something kind to Cynthia each time Denali made her feel uneasy. All Hoffman wanted was to maintain the friendship, so she held on to those comments. Denali was aware of this. She had excellent people skills and knew how to achieve what she wanted. The girl had learned to overcome obstacles and defend herself from an early age. Timothy Hoffman secretly dreaded this friendship because he knew his trusting, weak daughter would be easily duped, misled, or mistreated. Ever since Cynthia was born, this had been his worst dread. Cynthia was 19 years old in 2019. She was at the developmental stage of a 7th grader. In retrospect, it's easy to say that Denali's lack of concern for Cynthia's welfare was evident in numerous ways. She forced Hoffman to repeatedly ask for her approval. She vowed to be friends forever one day, and the next she could pretend Cynthia didn't exist by ignoring calls and texts. Denali was in control of this game. She chose when she would feel like an outsider and when her companion would feel needed. Cynthia tried everything she could to win Bramer's favor, without even realizing she was being manipulated. She would stop at nothing to please Denali. Then, however, something altered. Bramer began to behave differently. The girl was glued to her phone all the time, laughing over something, but she never told Cynthia why she was feeling so happy. Unable to contain herself, Denali confided in her buddy about a boy one day. She claimed that he was extremely wealthy, attractive, and flawless. She then displayed a picture of him from a social media account. In front of a high-end vehicle stood a handsome young man in his 20s. Denali claimed to be completely enamored with her. Cynthia believed whatever her friend stated, so she never questioned anything. In actuality, Hoffman felt excluded when Bramer texted her ideal partner, but she still saw Denali as her best friend. She always believed that they would educate themselves together, get employment, and stay friends for the rest of their lives. It was meant to be a typical summer day on June 2, 2019. That evening, Tim anticipated that his daughter would visit his office to collect payment for a recent work they completed together. Cynthia was supposed to meet with the father to talk about the next project, but she never did. Tim didn't give it much thought at first. Perhaps she lost track of time while she was with pals. However, Tim attempted to call his daughter as the minutes stretched into hours. He repeatedly dialed her number, but received no answer. Cynthia always picked up no matter where she was or what she was doing, so this wasn't like her. Answering calls was an unwritten family norm. Always, each Hoffman family member owned a cell phone. They were also aware that you had to answer Tim's call or return his call right away. Since they knew Tim didn't call for no reason, nobody in the family disregarded the father's calls. The message was not answered by Cynthia. "Is everything okay either?" Timothy made an effort to comfort himself by reminding himself that his daughter was a 19-year-old adult attempting to become independent. "She'd give you a call back." However, the fatherly instinct that had led him through every phase of Cynthia's existence continued to tell him that something had happened to his daughter. As the night wore on and the quiet deepened, Timothy made the decision to take a brief nap in the hopes that his daughter would call him in the morning and explain the circumstances, but he was unable to fall asleep. The father was plagued by a persistent sense of uneasiness. Tim's concern grew on June 3rd, the next day, when Cynthia had still not returned his calls or answered any messages. He was worried about her safety. He called Denali first thing in the morning. Her dearest buddy would have been the first to know what had transpired. Bramer immediately picked up and informed Tim that she had dropped Cynthia off at the playground with the polar bears after they had been hanging out with yesterday. As a child, Hoffman loved playing there, and as an adult, she frequently visited with friends. What Cynthia might have been doing there by herself was beyond Tim's comprehension. His daughter detested being by herself. In other words, she had a meeting scheduled. With whom was the question? She was terrified of getting lost, so she would never go anywhere by herself. Regretfully, Denali was unaware of her friend's intentions. However, Tim was positive that Cynthia had suffered a terrible fate. He began phoning every classmate in contact he could recall for his daughter. However, nobody had spotted the girl. The man had no intention of waiting for Cynthia to show up. In search of his daughter, he mounted his motorbike. Tim's first destination was the park with the polar bear playground. It was a 300-acre park. Its playground, which got its name from a structure built like a polar bear, was one of its features. The man looked for his daughter in the park. He repeatedly called her name, but nobody answered. Tim continued to communicate with Denali throughout this period, and she also voiced her worries regarding her friend's absence. It was the girl's hope that Cynthia would get home safely. Although Tim was extremely appreciative of everyone's help, it was insufficient to bring his daughter back. He immediately went to the Anchorage police station after leaving the park to report the missing person. The father didn't think Cynthia could disappear completely, as though she had just disappeared. Even parents of grown children are afraid of losing them. However, Timothy's terror was amplified multiple times due to Cynthia's weaknesses. It was the father's worst nightmare come true. In desperation, Timothy rallied all of his friends and acquaintances as the police started their search, and they searched the city streets, thick woodlands, and twisting highways on foot and on motorcycles. In an effort to locate Cynthia, volunteers searched every nook and cranny for any clues or signs. The police knocked on Nicole House's door that same day. Denali had lately gotten back in touch with her birth mother, whom she had reconnected with as an adult. Nicole claimed to have some information about Cynthia's disappearance and called the police to beg them to visit her home. The officer was intrigued by Denali's call because she was probably the last person to see Hoffman. Additionally, Nicole's testimony altered the direction of the inquiry. The woman claimed that her daughter had visited her the night before with a young man called Darren Schillmiller. Denali was sobbing uncontrollably and hysterically that her mother was unable to understand what she was saying. After calming down a little, Her daughter told Nicole a story that was so implausible that the mother initially believed it to be a bad joke. She just couldn't accept that such a thing could actually occur. According to Denali, Cynthia was shot by Darren, the man she accompanied, and her body was subsequently tossed into a river. Nicole assumed the teenagers were exaggerating or spouting gibberish, so she didn't trust a word of it. The woman assumed the confession was a joke because the male was laughing. However, Nicole called the police right away after learning that Cynthia Hoffman was missing when she woke up the following morning. When Denali Bramer claimed to have dropped Cynthia off at the park and not seen her since, she was actually lying to Timothy. When the girl texted Tim to wish for his daughter's safe return home, she was actually well aware of what had occurred to her buddy. The Hoffman family would be haunted by the cold and premeditated deception for the rest of their lives, because Denali knew Cynthia would never return home. Detectives took Denali Dakota Sky Bramer, aged 21, to the police station on June 4th for a formal interrogation. The girl immediately confessed when they inquired what had happened to her companion. It all began with a straightforward statement. Bramer asked Hoffman if she would want to go hiking on the morning of June 2nd. The phrase hike was a code word for using marijuana among their group of pals. Cynthia concurred. For someone close to her, she would stop at nothing. She wasn't alone, though. When Denali picked her up in her vehicle, Bramer had taken her 16-year-old friend Caden Mintosh with her. The youths were in a good mood and had already smoked marijuana. Cynthia joined in on the jovial laughs as well. Everything was all right as the vehicle traveled through the breathtaking scenery of Alaska. The companions, however, made the decision to pause in a parking lot next to Thunderbird Falls, which is situated in Alaska's Chugach State Park and is roughly a half-hour's drive from Anchorage. The breathtaking 60m Thunderbird waterfall is encircled by thick vegetation. The forest, the sound of the waterfall, and the fact that no one else was nearby made it the ideal spot to smoke marijuana and carry on having fun. The three pals spent time together. But then, as Denali mentioned, things became more sinister. Bramer blamed the following incidents on ineptitude and the fact that everyone was intoxicated. They made a joke about how remote the place was, saying it was as if they had been abducted and carried to a region devoid of people. In order to trick someone later, Denali said the pals agreed to stage a fictitious kidnapping, posing as though they were bound with duct tape and shooting pictures. Despite their quick realization that the story was implausible, the investigators paid close attention to the girl's account. Cynthia consented to the plan, so they chose to restrain her initially. Hoffman's ankles were taped with duct tape by Denali and Caden. Abruptly, she became agitated and insisted on being untied. Cynthia was sobbing and claiming that they truly intended to kidnap her, threatening to contact the police. It was getting scary. Denali's automobile contained prohibited chemicals. She might get into a lot of trouble if the police arrived. With the intention of frightening Hoffman into silence, Bramer drew her weapon. But before she knew what was going on, an emotional Caden took the revolver out of her hands and shot Cynthia in the head. As her companion collapsed to the ground, convulsing, Denali watched in fear. Bramer attempted to grab her phone to dial 911, but Caden made the most horrifying choice at that precise moment. He forced Cynthia, who was shackled, into the river. She was still alive then, despite having been shot. Rather than dialing 911, Denali and Caden went back to the parking lot, climbed into their cars, and drove off. The friend later texted Cynthia's father to wish for his daughter's safe return home. She did this in an effort to hide her identity and deflect attention away from Caden and herself. The youths then proceeded to another park. Cynthia's cell phone, pocketbook, clothing, identification, and the weapon used in the assault were all set on fire there. They honestly thought that by destroying these things, they would be able to escape punishment. The detectives questioned Denali and then called Caleb Leland to get his account of events. His tale was the same. The three were first making jokes. Cynthia then threatened to contact the police. The boy's memory vanished, and he didn't even recall firing the gun. Before he dumped her body into the river, he remembered just the injured girl twitching on the ground. Making sure Denali didn't go afoul of the law was Leland's top priority at the time. This 16-year-old youngster seems to have been influenced by Bramer. He obviously wanted her approval and was enamored with her. During his interrogation, Caden made it clear that he was romantically interested in Denali. Although this is obviously not a justification, it seems that Cynthia's death was motivated by her best friend. As a result, a missing persons investigation became a body search. In the meantime, police officials visited the Hoffman residence to impart the devastating news that their daughter was probably dead and that her best friend was to blame. No parent would want to learn that their child had suffered such a terrible fate. However, Tim's worst nightmare had come true because he had always been concerned about Cynthia. A young woman's body had washed up on the coast not long before Denali, and Caden said Cynthia had slipped into the water. Gray duct tape was used to bind the victim. A gunshot wound to her head had occurred. The remains needed to be identified by Timothy. In fact, the body belonged to Cynthia Hoffman, his daughter, who was 19 years old. After days of looking for his child, the father was forced to confront the harsh reality. Cynthia had passed away. He had lost his cherished daughter. Denali Bramer and Caden McIntosh were charged with first-degree murder and evidence tampering following the discovery of the body. However, the probe continued. Cynthia's father understood right away that the young people's story was a fabrication. Although Timothy was devastated and found it difficult to process the terrible news, he was adamant about pursuing justice and didn't think the two friends' decision was taken at random. Denali apologized and acknowledged her mistake during one of her appearances during a preliminary court hearing, but she was more worried about her daughter's reaction when she grew up and found out the specifics of the case than she was about what she and Caden had done. Denali Dakota Sky Bramer, 18, was discovered to be a mother whose child had been placed in foster care. The defendant probably didn't care much for her own daughter and was only attempting to win sympathy. Then another young man, Caleb Allen Russell Leland, 24, was taken into custody a few days later on June 9th. He was accused of both murder and conspiracy. Two kids involved in the crime were also taken into custody, but because of their age, their identities were kept secret. We don't know anything about their role in the murder because they were handled by another agency. Investigators thoroughly examined Denali Bramer's electronic devices in order to reach to the bottom of it, and they discovered a plethora of erased data, social media correspondence, videos, and audio communications. All of this pointed to a far more sinister and profound reason for the crime committed against Cynthia Hoffman. Following the defendant's bail release, Denali sent a video message to her fans. She said that Cynthia was shot by Caden and someone else while she was being kept at gunpoint because she didn't want to pass away without testifying against the monsters who had killed her best friend. Denali now feared for her life. Bramer apparently tried to clear her name with this, but the unsettling findings didn't stop there. Upon closer inspection of the girl's phone, authorities discovered recordings and pictures of the attack on Cynthia, along with a whole series of messages between Denali and a man named Tyler. Everything appeared much less innocent than the youngsters had first stated. The communications indicated that Denali and Tyler had been in contact for a number of months. Living in Kansas, he met Bramer on a dating site and the two fell in love through a transactional relationship in which Denali sent him pictures in exchange for cash. The girl was able to purchase illegal narcotics with this money, which she subsequently sold. She also made money by offering personal services. Denali sent more than just pictures and videos to the internet, and she actually met men. In the end, one of Bramer's clients became pregnant. Her use of strong illegal substances increased as a result of the growing issues. Because of her dangerous line of work, the girl even had to carry a gun. It all began when a stranger sent a straightforward, flirtatious message. Denali was accustomed to male attention. She was one of those females that drew men in with her wild, fiery personality. She was daring and a little brazen. However, this communication was not like the others. Tyler had a lot of money, incredibly wealthy. Cynthia couldn't take her eyes off her phone when she noticed her pal laughing. Tyler, a handsome young man whose profile picture showed him standing in front of an expensive sports car, was the one she was texting. He pretended to be completely enamored with Denali. Traditional romantic manipulations. You are unique. You're unlike any girl I've ever met. I want to look after you. Many adolescent girls subconsciously harbored the fantasy of a flawless prince who could handle bullies and solve all issues. Denali had the good fortune to encounter one. Tyler promised her more than simply affection. He gave her a financial promise. First, there were only pictures. Then pictures in a bikini, and then there were going to be even fewer clothes. It wasn't free either. Denali was happy with any money, especially if it didn't require her to interact with the man in person. When Tyler referred to her as his queen and persuaded her that they had a unique, exclusive relationship, Bramer felt secure and sending pictures appeared innocuous. Naturally, Denali suspected that Tyler wasn't who he said he was. For instance, he used Hayden rather than Tyler on the dating site. She did, however, also utilize fictitious aliases online. Denali had dealt with a variety of males, so she didn't think the guy was odd, even when he began asking her to perform increasingly twisted things, and the prize continued to increase. For Bramer, it was huge sums of money that she had never seen before. The girl made every effort to win over her new acquaintance. However, Denali wasn't totally blameless either. She then feigned love in order to obtain additional funds. Since there was no Tyler, it was actually a double deceit. Instead, a 21-year-old stranger named Darren Schillmiller sat in a small bedroom in New Salisbury, Indiana, behind a computer screen. A grocery store employee, million-dollar bank accounts, luxury aircraft, and sports cars were all absent. A predatory manipulator who acts like a puppeteer plucking strings while seated in his grandparents' home. He used someone else's photo on dating apps. Of course, this was nothing new for Darren. He posed as someone else online for years, tricking women and seducing guys to see how far they would go. One woman thought she was speaking with a famous person. She also believed she had discovered her ideal career. In an attempt to carry on a cyber romance in real life, a third sent obscene pictures. Darren was a master manipulator of people. He made the long-term decision with Denali. Initially, he used romantic language to win her over, made her feel wanted and needed, hooked her on his attention, separated her from others by persuading her that no one else understood her the way he did, and then made a demand designed to test her allegiance. Nobody would ever consent to that, yet Bramer did. Darren wasn't merely making unreasonable demands or extorting money. He wanted blood this time. Denali had already become too involved in this fraud. She had been duped by a ghost. She was pushed to cross a line by the man's increasing offers of money for more explicit content. The requirement that she document the instances in which she physically restrained or even fought someone in order to impress him was among the most unsettling. Bramer consented to complete increasingly strange requirements since she was so engrossed in their relationship and of course the money. She occasionally recruited friends like Caden and Caleb by offering them cash in exchange for putting on a fight on camera. Denali wasn't sure what to believe when Darren offered the girl $9 million to kill someone. That is until she looked up her PayPal account and found that there was a $9 million pending transaction. She initially believed it to be a joke, but Darren persisted. He depicted the opulent lifestyle they would lead when Bramer complied with his requests. The man demanded that his fiancée demonstrate her willingness to go to whatever lengths for him. He could only trust her after that. Take the life of a stranger and get rich right away. Denali agreed, and her greed was intense. But because Darren had certain conditions, it wasn't that easy. A lady had to be the victim, and because Bramer trusted Cynthia and knew she wouldn't oppose even the most outrageous proposal, he determined it would be her. Hoffman's fate was thus predetermined long before the actual events took place. Denali needed assistance. Therefore, she wasn't going to do it by herself. She then resorted to her friends, careless youngsters seeking excitement. Caden McIntosh, 16, was the first to be recruited. Caleb Allen Russell Leland, 24, then arrived and consented to offer his vehicle in order to execute the scheme. This is how a bunch of adolescents agreed to commit a horrible crime for a large payout, for money that didn't exist, and for a stranger they most likely wouldn't have even spoken to in person. It was evident from the letters exchanged between the three conspirators that Denali had picked the spot, a secluded local where Cynthia's cries would go unheard. Bramer would message Darren once the scheme was in motion, and he would confirm the $9 million transfer after everything was finished. Or so Denali believed. Cynthia was still unaware of what was ahead at that point. She didn't realize she was going to be executed. She thought she was going on a small adventure with her best friend. She had no idea that her prime would soon come to an end. Worst of all, Denali didn't seem to feel anything. She was excited because she saw dollar signs and Cynthia was just the price to pay. No remorse, no doubts. How Denali persuaded Cynthia to allow her to tape her lips shut and tie her up is unknown. The poor girl panicked as soon as she realized the joke was gone. She screamed and struggled as Cadence started removing her clothes. Everything was captured on her phone by her best friend, who then emailed the pictures to her online boyfriend. After it was finished, the adolescents picked up the strewn about objects from the floor, went back to the car, and drove away to get rid of the evidence. Denali didn't feel bad about what she had done at the time. To her, it was just another chore to finish in order to get a huge quantity of money and the opportunity to live a carefree life. Denali made the decision to cut ties with Darren Schillmiller after investigators revealed that the man she had stored on her phone as baby was actually a common manipulator and liar. Her affection was gone in an instant. He had deceived her into committing a violent crime and now he was a monster. Darren Schillmiller was arrested on June 19, 2019. Although his name wasn't in the news for a long time, there were indications that this individual was dangerous even before he planned the murder from behind a computer screen in another state. Dirty nappies aroused him more than anything else. Darren sent messages to young mothers in a 600-person tiny hamlet requesting pictures of their kids. A young woman named Cheyenne met a man named Austin on a dating app about a year prior to Cynthia's murder. He appeared to be normal at first. It was a light, flirtatious, and light-hearted discussion until one day Austin requested his new friend to do him an odd favor to film her changing her kids' nappies. Cheyenne removed the user's account and blocked her since she was so shocked. The woman became extremely frightened upon discovering that Austin resided in her hometown in Indiana. Eventually, she summoned up the confidence to approach this man. It found out that Darren Schillmiller, a former classmate, was the person behind the name Austin. Cheyenne shared her experience with other women on social media. Darren sent her a message expressing regret and vowing never to request something like again when she attempted to draw attention to the problem. To get his classmate to remove the compromising post, the guy tricked her. Soon after, another dashing young man, this time going by the name Dylan, appears on the dating site. Darren contacted a possible victim under a false alias once more. Brittany, another woman, has known Darren for years. In high school, they even had a brief romantic relationship. Immediately following their breakup, Brittany forgot about the man, who was quiet, awkward, and harsh. Darren abruptly reappeared in her life in February 2019 by sending a message from his actual social media account. It appeared to be innocuous. The former classmates engaged in some conversation before Darren claimed to have a personal issue and a desire to get rid of his fetish. Everything was good. He requested that she email him a video of herself changing a baby's nappy in order to accomplish this. Brittany blocked Darren and erased the entire discussion right away. Only after Schillmiller was taken into custody did both women speak out regarding the young man's odd requests. Both their own and their children's lives were in danger. Brittany, his ex-girlfriend, disclosed that the man had been abusive to her on several occasions while they were dating. They split up for that reason. 2 days after Darren's arrest on Thursday, June 13th of 2024, the sound of motorcycles echoed through Anchorage's streets. It was a declaration, a father's last homage to his daughter whom he lost far too soon. The community rallied when Timothy Hoffman invited his motorbike buddies to accompany the hearse that was transporting Cynthia's body to the church. It was a united ride by bikers from all across the region. It was more than a simple goodbye. It was an honoring of Cynthia's soul. People banded together to help her father pursue justice. The church was packed with hundreds of people. However, Timothy didn't want their friendship to be solely focused on sadness and loss. He wanted everyone to remember the joy his daughter exuded, even though he had lost her. How she loved without holding back and laughed too loudly. How she always addressed the world with kindness despite having a unique perspective on things. It was more than just a monument. It served to preserve Cynthia's memory. Timothy made sure the farewell was full with stories, music, and laughs rather than allowing grief to take over. His late daughter would have desired that. However, the struggle for justice was far from ended. Timothy made plans for his future as others grieved because he had to appear in court against the individuals who killed his daughter at 8:30 the following morning. The father vowed to fight until the very end. His goal was to hold the monsters responsible for his child's injuries accountable. Tim promised to show up to all court appearances. Darren Schillmiller was charged in August 2019, but entered a not guilty plea. The Hoffman family submitted a huge photograph of Cynthia standing in front of a mural with wings painted behind her to the court sessions. She appeared angelic as a result. They made a conscious decision. Timothy Hoffman wanted Darren to comprehend the destruction he had caused and to see Cynthia's face and the life he had taken. Timothy pleaded with the judge to refuse Darren bail and to block his internet because he was worried that the young guy may destroy someone else's life. The father held a crucifix necklace that held the ashes of his daughter. It was all that remained of his young daughter. Darren just shook his head as Timothy spoke. The man remained steadfast. It was his love for his daughter, his anger, and his anguish. The entire courtroom was filled with those feelings. The mastermind who gave the orders, the man who fired the shot, and the girl who tricked Cynthia into falling into a trap were all seated at the defense table during the trial. Not a single seat in the room was vacant. Keeping their heads down, Denali Bramer, Caden Mintosh, and Darren Schillmiller didn't resemble the individuals they had posed as. Denali was no longer a strong monarch. Darren was no rich judge of destiny, and Caden was no daring shot. They were regular folks who had destroyed an innocent girl's life as well as their own. They now had to deal with the fallout. This was the moment Cynthia's father had been waiting for years. Timothy didn't hold back as he took the witness stand and gave Denali Bramer a direct look. He talked of his daughter's developmental delays, her altered perspective on the world, her naive faith in others, and how she regarded Denali as a friend with whom she could share all of her happiness and sorrows. Cynthia, however, had to plead with her for forgiveness. She cried, and Denali laughed while tying her up like an animal. There was complete silence in the courtroom at that moment. His car's provider, Caleb Leland, received a 30-year prison sentence for conspiring to commit murder. He stated in his closing remarks that he didn't think his pals would follow through. He did, however, take part in the plot. The shooter, Caden Mintosh, entered a guilty plea and received a 45-year jail sentence. He said he couldn't recall who fired the shot because he had blacked out. The crime's mastermind, Darren Schillmiller, was sentenced to 99 years in jail for inciting to murder and another 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole for conspiracy. The young man didn't defend himself. Cynthia's best friend, Denali Bramer, came last. In addition, she was sentenced to 30 years in jail for conspiracy and 99 years for first-degree murder. The girl sobbed and pleaded for another opportunity. However, since Cynthia would never be given another chance, the court didn't care. Hers was gone forever. Unfortunately, the Hoffman family's tragedies didn't stop there. Following the trial, Timothy made the decision to honor Cynthia with a motorbike ride on each anniversary of her passing. Only a handful of Tim's closest buddies were on the initial journey. However, a growing number of bikers joined them over time. People began to gather in support of Timothy. Every year he led the motorbike ride along a long twisting route while wearing a leather jacket with his daughter's name. The path Cynthia had previously gone to her inevitable demise was followed by the group. The purpose of the journey was to pay homage to Cynthia and express that she will always be remembered. Timothy Hoffman set off once more with 50 passengers on June 2, 2023. Breakfast at the Carousel Cafe was the first destination. After that, they rode down the trails, arriving at Thunderbird Falls in Chugg State Park, where Cynthia passed away. Timothy, however, never got there. Something happened as the gang was traveling down the highway around 1:30 p.m. Hoffman's motorbike flipped after losing control and veering off the road. Both Tim and his wife, who was riding behind him, were flung onto the pavement. The bikers yelled and hurried to Timothy's aid, but he was not answering. Regretfully, the man did not survive, despite the fact that medical personnel hurried him to the hospital. Tim's wife had multiple surgeries after suffering a shattered skull and spine. Timothy struggled for 4 years to accept Cynthia's terrible destiny. He also followed her on the 4th anniversary of her passing. Tim only ever wants justice for their daughter, according to Cynthia's mother, and now they're back together. There is more to Cynthia's story than just sadness. Additionally, it serves as a reminder and caution that using the internet might be risky. Social media should unite people and be used for communication. Other Darren Schillmillers, however, are out there searching for unsuspecting victims. You can't be sure of someone's identity or authenticity when chatting with them online. Ultimately, a thug in a dim alley did not hurt Cynthia. Someone she trusted and loved took her life, and a stranger's words and pledges to her pal are to blame. Always be skeptical of everything you read and see on the internet. It's not true that everyone you call a friend is one. If something doesn't feel right, follow your gut. Thank you for watching and for being part of this true crime community. Your support means everything. Every like, comment, and share helps us continue to grow and bring more awareness to the world around us. Together, we're building a space where truth, justice, and curiosity come together to uncover the realities many choose to ignore. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our latest uploads. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and comment below to let us know your thoughts or what kind of cases you'd like to see next. Your voice helps shape the content we create and keeps this community active and engaged. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and always trust your instincts. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides behind a friendly smile. Keep your eyes open, protect your peace, and remember awareness is your strongest defense.
It was early morning on May 17, 2005, when a 911 call came in from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming. She said someone had broken in and shot her husband. When police got there, they found a house in complete disorder. Drawers were open, things were thrown everywhere, and glass from a broken door covered the floor. In the bedroom, they found a man's body. At first, it looked like a robbery gone wrong. But something didn't feel right. The story didn't add up. The kids remembered things differently. And then, police found something hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed everything. Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 2, 1962 in the quiet town of Alexandria, nestled in Campbell County, Kentucky. Raised in a religious, close-knit family alongside his siblings, Deborah, Henry Jr., and James, Bob showed signs early on of a sharp mind and ambitious spirit. While much of his early life remains undocumented, what is known is that even before reaching adulthood, Bob had already begun charting his own course. He had a vision to become wealthy and run his own business. Starting from the ground up, Bob offered chimney cleaning and small-scale roof repairs. With long days, modest pricing, and an impeccable work ethic, he slowly built a reputation as a dependable and friendly worker. His solo effort paid off. Over time, Bob transformed his one-man service into a thriving enterprise, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep of Alexandria. Under his watchful eye, the company became known for quality, efficiency, and reliability, earning both loyal clients and impressive profits. With money pouring in, Bob set his sights even higher. He began acquiring rental properties, eventually owning around 20. These investments amplified his income, positioning him as one of the area's most successful businessmen. Wealth soon translated into lifestyle. Bob embraced luxury, sports cars, horses, an airplane, a sizable boat, and an arsenal of expensive firearms. His boat, often seen cruising Lake Cumberland, became infamous for its wild adult-only parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily clad guests. It was at one of his favorite local restaurants where Bob met 18-year-old Amy Pave. Amy, also from Alexandria, came from humble beginnings. Born in 1969 into a working-class family, her life was shaped by financial limitations and a household affected by her father's struggle with alcohol. Still, Amy was determined to break the cycle. After graduating high school with top honors in 1986, she pursued business studies at a local community college connected to Northern Kentucky University. To fund her education, she worked as a waitress, where she crossed paths with Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charismatic. At first reserved, Amy soon found herself drawn into his world. She began attending his notorious lake parties, gradually becoming a regular fixture in his inner circle. But Amy didn't remain just another guest. She captured Bob's heart. Their relationship grew serious, and after 4 years together, the two were married. For Amy, it was the ultimate transformation. She had gone from modest roots to marrying one of the most sought-after bachelors in the region. Soon, the couple started a family. Their daughter Morgan was born in 1996, followed by a son, Trevor, 3 years later. Amy, once the carefree partygoer, shifted into the role of devoted mother. Her wild nights on the lake were replaced with school functions and parenting. Bob continued to expand his business and investments, but one area frustrated him: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors was a burden he resented. He preferred the freedom of the lake over the confines of an office. Weekends often saw him vanishing aboard his boat, sometimes for days, refusing to disclose his whereabouts. Friends later recalled that Bob had begun drifting away from his family, drawn back into a life of indulgence and secrecy. Some sources even claimed that he and Amy had an open relationship. Regardless of the truth, Bob eventually decided to merge his personal and professional life more closely. Since Amy had studied business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative responsibilities. At first, Amy seemed hesitant, but eventually she agreed. From then on, she managed the company's books, payroll, and tax obligations. The business was booming, and the Bosleys appeared to be thriving. They lived in a rustic log cabin nestled in the woods south of Alexandria, a temporary residence while their dream home was being built nearby. A sprawling estate with 14 acres of land, complete with stained glass windows, a stone tower, and even Gothic gargoyles. To the outside world, the Bosleys embodied the American dream. They were attractive, successful, generous with their time, and deeply involved in their church and children's school activities. Bob often donated services to low-income families, and his name was respected throughout the community. But like many fairy tales, their story had a dark side. Behind the scenes, Amy's role as administrator gave her access to the full financial picture, and with Bob distracted by business expansion, the lake, and the Dream House project, Amy quietly began diverting company funds. Instead of paying the company's taxes, she rerouted the money into an undisclosed personal account. This embezzlement went unnoticed for years, but no one avoids the IRS forever. The Internal Revenue Service had been tracking the company's missing tax payments. They issued repeated letters, made calls, and even attempted to set up meetings. But Bob never received any of these warnings. That's because Amy had arranged for all IRS correspondence to be delivered to a private mailbox only she could access. She was well aware the government was closing in, but perhaps she believed she could keep stalling indefinitely. Everything changed on the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before the couple's 15th wedding anniversary. Around 5 a.m., a frantic 911 call came in from Amy Bosley. Her panicked voice filled the line, but the call was suddenly cut off by a loud crashing sound. Dispatchers tried to reconnect. Moments later, law enforcement was racing to the Bosley cabin. When officers arrived, they found Amy in shock, clutching her children. Her sister soon arrived to take the kids, while Amy was brought in for questioning. Police secured the scene and called in the crime scene unit. At first light, additional officers arrived to search the surrounding forest with K-9 units and even a helicopter, searching for what they believed was a fleeing intruder. Inside the bedroom, they discovered Bob's lifeless body. He was found kneeling by the side of the bed, slumped forward, riddled with gunshot wounds. Yet oddly, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, raising more questions than answers. Instead of bringing clarity, the investigation only deepened the mystery. And as detectives continued combing through the evidence, they began to suspect that the crime scene and perhaps the entire story wasn't what it seemed. Aside from the children's bedrooms, the entire house was in disarray. Kitchen cabinets stood wide open, including the ones beneath the sink, a strange place for a thief to search. A rear door had a broken window suggesting a possible point of entry, but curiously, most of the shattered glass was found outside, not inside, an inconsistency that raised eyebrows from the start. The signs of disorder continued throughout the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open and prescription bottles were scattered across the floor. It looked more like staged chaos than the aftermath of a fast, focused intruder. And based on the 911 call made by Amy, the alleged assailant had fled quickly. So why the mess? While crime scene investigators worked through the house, detectives began questioning Amy Bosley at the station. She appeared shaken, distraught at times, but often confused, as if struggling to keep her story straight. She described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a distinct odor of urine. According to Amy, he had burst in during the night and attacked both her and Bob. She displayed 2 marks on her chest, claiming they were from the assault. When asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy floated the idea that he wasn't well-liked, suggesting he had a wild reputation and might have made enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically named Noah Heim, a contractor and longtime friend of Bob, as someone who had recently argued with him. But Noah was quickly ruled out. He had a solid alibi and was deeply affected by Bob's death. Meanwhile, panic rippled through the Alexandria community. Schools were closed for several days as fear of a killer on the loose took hold. Neighbors couldn't reconcile the idea that someone as kind and generous as Bob, known to give the shirt off his back, had been brutally gunned down in his own home. Back at the cabin, detectives searched for answers. Only 2 shell casings were recovered near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds. That led investigators to expand their search to the basement. There, inside the family's washing machine, they found soaked clothing, and at the bottom, a folded cloth containing 4 additional shell casings. Why would a fleeing killer take the time to hide evidence in a washer inside the victim's home? It didn't make sense. Even stranger, an aluminum baseball bat was found nearby with fresh scratches and white residue. Lab analysis would be needed to determine its significance. For now, Amy was released and allowed to reunite with her children. But the puzzle pieces were falling into place. The crime scene appeared staged. Valuables, including stacks of cash, were left untouched. Amy's emotional display seemed hollow, no tears, no real grief. Investigators suspected there was more beneath the surface. And then came the breakthrough. Staff from the IRS visited the station after hearing about Bob's death. They had been trying for months to contact him regarding a massive unpaid tax bill, over $1.7 million. A meeting had been scheduled for the very day Bob was found dead. The IRS agents also revealed something bizarre. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice was strange, high-pitched, and clearly unnatural. To them, it sounded like a woman pretending to be a man. That voice had been Amy's. Now, the motive was clear. Amy, entrusted with the company's finances, had siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars, diverting tax payments into her own private account. Bob, who had no idea what was happening, was about to discover the truth just as the IRS prepared to confront him face to face. Adding to the tension were Bob's alleged affairs. His sister later told investigators she once overheard Amy say that if Bob ever cheated or left her, she would shoot him. At the time, it sounded like a joke. Now, it sounded like a promise. Despite mounting evidence, Amy Bosley continued to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insisted she loved Bob even if their marriage wasn't perfect. She admitted they had their problems, what couple didn't, but claimed there was no reason she would ever harm the father of her children. But investigators saw a different picture. Ballistics testing confirmed that all 6 bullets that struck Bob matched the 6 casings collected, 2 in the bedroom and 4 hidden in the washing machine. Then came a pivotal moment in the investigation. Interviews with Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6. Questioned separately, both children gave identical accounts. They had gone to sleep peacefully, only to be startled awake by 6 gunshots. Then they heard glass shattering. Amy's version of events had the order reversed. First the glass breaking, then the shots. Her story was unraveling. Even the scratches on her chest, presented as injuries from a struggle with the intruder, were suspicious. The marks were too symmetrical, more like staged wounds than defensive injuries. Further examination of her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the alleged attack. It had been carefully cut with scissors, then ripped to appear damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob's murder, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and formally charged her with his homicide. One crucial piece was still missing: the murder weapon. That, too, eventually surfaced, though how it was discovered remains disputed. According to one account, a pistol from Bob's own gun collection was found hidden in Amy's handbag, tucked behind a wardrobe. A second version claims the weapon was discovered later by Amy's sister, who had taken custody of her children and belongings that night. While sorting through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and immediately contacted a lawyer who turned it over to police. Regardless of how it was recovered, ballistic testing confirmed the gun matched the 6 casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. The bullets inside Bob's body were too damaged to confirm a direct match, but the circumstantial case was overwhelming. As the trial began, prosecutors painted a clear and damning narrative. For years, Amy had secretly bled Bob's company dry, diverting tax payments and pocketing the money. She kept the IRS at bay through mail redirection and deception, but her luck had run out. On the morning of May 17, 2005, Bob was scheduled to meet with IRS agents who were demanding answers. Amy knew what that meeting meant: exposure, divorce, prison. And so, the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer devised a desperate plan. The night before the IRS meeting, with her children sleeping nearby and her husband unaware, Amy quietly retrieved one of Bob's firearms. Some reports even suggest she sedated the children beforehand. Standing at his bedside while he slept, she fired. Bob, wounded, but not immediately killed, awoke and tried to stop her. According to investigators, the trajectory of his injuries indicated that he lunged toward the attacker, only to realize too late that the gun was in Amy's hands. Stunned, bleeding, and betrayed, Bob couldn't overpower her. She fired again. By the time it was over, the man who had built a fortune from scratch, who had trusted Amy with everything, lay dead in the home they were building for their future. And the woman who once stood by his side now stood accused of orchestrating his execution, not out of fear, but out of greed. Amy Bosley's carefully constructed life of luxury and respect had collapsed in a single night of cold calculation. What remained was a shattered family, a stunned community, and a legacy of betrayal that would never be forgotten. She shattered the rear glass door with a baseball bat, tore through cabinets and drawers to simulate a burglary, then hid 4 spent casings wrapped in a cloth at the bottom of the washing machine. To make her wounds appear credible, Amy lightly cut her chest with what was likely scissors, then slashed her blouse to simulate a struggle. She ended her performance with a desperate 911 call, her voice frantic, the scene staged. Forensic evidence told a different story. Lab analysis confirmed that glass fragments on the aluminum bat matched the broken rear door. The bat, identified by her children as belonging to the family, had not been wielded by an intruder, but used as a prop by Amy herself. Police found no footprints, no vehicle tracks, no sign of anyone matching the description Amy gave. No outsider had come or gone that night. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered the truth about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy was convinced Bob had been unfaithful. Photos retrieved from the couple's safe, taken during wild parties on Lake Cumberland, revealed a second life and confirmed at least one extramarital affair. But while betrayal may have burned, the motive went far deeper. Amy's secret was unraveling. She had embezzled nearly $2 million from her husband's company by failing to pay taxes and diverting the money elsewhere. The IRS had scheduled a meeting with Bob for the morning after his murder, one that would have exposed everything. Killing him, Amy believed, would bury the secret. With Bob gone, his assets would cover the debt and she could walk away with the rest. But the children's testimony, hearing the gunshots before the glass shattered, destroyed her timeline. And though the defense claimed the bullet casings could have been dropped from Bob's own pockets after visiting the shooting range, the evidence piled up. Still, Amy's attorney argued there were no witnesses, no DNA, and no definitive link between the casings and the bullets in Bob's body. With enough ambiguity, they might sway the jury. Fearing Amy might walk free and unwilling to force the Bosley children to testify against their mother, prosecutors offered a plea deal. Amy would avoid a trial, spare her children the trauma, and receive a reduced sentence. In exchange, she admitted guilt without ever revealing what she had done with the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley entered a Campbell County courtroom in a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her demeanor was unreadable. Before sentencing, Bob's family addressed her directly. His brother James called her a liar and a fraud, warning that while she might one day enjoy freedom, she would never escape the memories. He reminded her that every night she would see Bob's face and the tears of the children she orphaned. Deborah, Bob's sister, stared at Amy as she asked the one question that haunted them all. Did he beg you to stop? No one would ever know. Then came Bob's mother, Audrey, heartbroken and trembling, reading a letter filled with grief over a final goodbye that never came. Amy sat silent, eyes on the floor, wiping away tears. The judge, bound by the plea agreement, condemned the damage Amy had done, not only to her husband, but to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Under Kentucky law, she became eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence. That meant 17 years behind bars. On May 17, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob's murder, Amy Bosley, then 54 years old, walked out of the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely noted her release. Her current whereabouts remain unknown, but some believe she may have gone in search of the millions she once siphoned away. As for Bob, his final resting place is St. Stephen's Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky, a man remembered for his generosity, ambition, and devotion to family, cut down by the very person he trusted most. In hindsight, Amy's actions seemed both tragic and senseless. She wasn't destitute. Her husband wasn't cruel. The IRS might have worked out a settlement. And if her motive was revenge, a divorce might have left her richer and free. But instead, she chose murder. And as the old American proverb goes, one made famous by Benjamin Franklin, nothing is certain except death and taxes. In Amy Bosley's case, both came knocking. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, do subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments from where the world are you watching my video. Also subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot to me.